We're gonna get started again because we know people have planes to catch, places to go, people to see. All right, thanks everyone. We don't want to lose anyone before this last round, and especially because we're going to give Charles the last word as is appropriate. So we want everyone to be here for that. And this is kind of our speed talking panel. This is the panel from back home, and we mean home near and far. We mean home, my dear friends and colleagues, all of whom are fans of Charles. How can you not be? And so back home here at the law school at Boulder, some of our colleagues who aren't natural resources and American Indian law people, and I know it seems like we all are, I think we all are actually, but a few of us do other things too, are joining us, and we're all just gonna give short 3 minutes or less tributes to Charles, and then really back home for Charles, we're gonna hear from his sons and daughters. I know now not to call them daughters-in-law because every time I do that he corrects me. And I was thinking, a few of you have asked why did we do this when we did, and I know I explained a little bit last night about the timing. It was just, I don't know, the timing was right to do this for Charles. We all kind of converged on that idea about a year ago. I do think, though, maybe somewhere in the back of all of our minds was the notion that we really did want to do it for not only Charles himself, but also his family. And this is in many ways really for you, and I'm going to quote Liza Getches, who I don't think is here, because it echoed very much something that Seth just told me in the hallway. Liza said at the service for her dad that she had no idea how much David had done in his life. And I thought that made complete sense to me because we don't see our parents that way. We know they work and they do important things, but they basically leave the house and go to work and then come back and focus all their attention on us, their children, because we are the center of the universe, right? That's how you see things and think as a child. And how for Liza it was so amazing to see all these things that her father had done out in the world. And so I hope in some small way we've given that to you all to see about your father now, while you can ask him questions about it for the long remainder of time that you and the rest of us have with him. So thank you for coming and for putting up with all of us and our emails and organizing. And Mira, I hope you get that kitty. I've already put a word in with your dad about that. We talked about that last night. Okay, so in order, I'm going to turn it over to. Oh, right. I'm sorry. We have one last reading before we turn to our tributes from Christina Warner, who has worked with Charles for the last year plus, really, as a fellow, doing incredible work.
Like Charles, I moved here from the East, and so while my not nearly as deep, it's been impossible to ignore the inextricable call of the West. Charles's book, Fire on the Plateau, is what I tell people to read when they ask if I'm ever moving back home, because in it is a description of the West that evokes the beauty of this land in a way that only Charles can. So I'm going to read a passage where Charles reflects on the first time he saw the Colorado Plateau and how his impression of it has changed over time. Still, everything whizzed by, and I was glad that it did. This place was just mileage that had to be logged in order to get home. Sure, the San Francisco peaks north of Flagstaff looked sublime. That view struck me as the real West, mountains. But all the rest, the red rock formations and the broad open range country, were sterile, gritty. Today, my senses race when I am in that country. The buttes and mesas coax my eyes toward them, and the red rock walls make concentration lines on my forehead as the colors change with the new angles and intensities of a day's light. What is it that causes a place to occupy a cherished spot on the best wall of a person's mind? A place such as a sparse, high desert landscape where a person's taste will have to be acquired. A place where the cultures are different and hard for outsiders to comprehend. This is a complicated matter, but it is one that tells us a great deal about our humanity, as the force of place is created by peoples and history as well as terrain, by the ordinary as well as the elegant and the dramatic, by the emotional and spiritual as well as the quantifiable, by the incremental passage of time that eventually breeds intimacy, by all of the things that allow a person to acquire a profound understanding of the story of a place.
All right, thanks, Christina. Well, I would like to offer just a little bit of reinforcement to my friend Ann Getches, who last night was kind of wondering where some of the slices of roast were in this program. I want to talk about the seminar that I was privileged to participate in 1988. It was the very first Advanced Natural Resources Law seminar at CU. Charles did correct me last night that there had been one at Oregon, or two, maybe a couple at Oregon before that, but this was the first one at CU. And we did the Upper Rio Grande Basin in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And David and Philip went along with us and provided immense entertainment to those of us who went along on the trip. We had an unbelievable set of experiences. We went to the San Juan Pueblo. We went and visited in the Acequia in the San Luis Valley. We went to the Ghost Ranch of Georgia O'Keeffe, and all in all, it's just we had dinner with John Nichols after having read the Milagro Beanfield War. So it was just the perfect trip until the final night where we were having dinner at Tomasita's in Santa Fe, and we managed to annoy our leader and professor just a tad. We got the bill, and as law students are wont to do, we were kind of eyeing it and threw down what we thought was the appropriate contribution for the bill. And guess what? It came up way short. And so we were kind of looking and arguing, and this kept going on. And finally, Charles just said, "I've had enough. I don't care who ordered the goddamn chimichanga grande." And the next thing we knew, he had stood up on a chair in the middle of the restaurant and was saying, "Can anyone help these law students out? Do I have a bid? Do I have a bid?" And suffice it to say, we were so mortified that we immediately pulled our wallets out and threw the rest of the money in as fast as we could. But, you know, I think it was bonding moments like that. I think when we got back to the hotel that night, we said, you know, God, we love this guy. Not only is he brilliant, not only is he inspiring, but he's also just a hell of a lot of fun. So, Charles, we love you dearly. Thank you.
So I'm William Boyd here from the law school. I first met Charles about 8 years ago. He was on the hiring committee. I was interviewing on the law school teaching market, and it became very apparent right away, and even more so since that he's not your typical law professor or typical academic. He's been a mentor and a friend ever since that time. He's been very important to me professionally and personally, and I am really thankful beyond words to have had the chance to know him, to have worked with him, to continue working with him. He has changed me. He really stands apart in our profession. He is a formidable academic. He's a legend in his fields, plural. He is also, though, at the same time, a true public intellectual, as Patty and others have talked about today. He's someone who speaks and reaches a much broader audience than the rest of us. And at the same time, and I think this is what is really, in some ways, most remarkable about him, he is in the world all the time in a very serious and sustained way. He's always been deeply involved in all manner of real-world struggles, some of which many of us don't know about or learned about in the last day, and just are mind-blowing what he's done for people. Most recently, of course, with his efforts on the Bears Ears Monument. I think he has a touch of the deep magic, and I really believe that. He has it, and everyone who knows him and has spent time with him knows that and feels it. And some of that magic really comes from his profound sense of place. He belongs in that noble tradition that Stegner writes about. He's a lover of the known earth, of the known weathers and known neighbors, both human and non-human. I've seen this firsthand on the few occasions when we have fished together, when he has been kind enough to take me fishing to some of his places. He has a whole journal of all the places that he's fished in. Sometimes he'll bring out the journals and read about trips that he took with various people years ago. Catching brook trout by the dozens on the headwaters of the Poudre River in Rocky Mountain National Park, or cutthroats on North Cottonwood Creek in the Collegiates. And I was, of course, fishing away. I always believed it was sort of me against the fish, partly where I grew up. But he told me one time, he said, you know, you need to thank the fish. You need to thank the fish every time after you catch the fish and release the fish. And of course, ever since I've been thanking the fish, and I catch a lot more fish now. And that has been very, very important for my fishing experience. So thank you for that, Charles, the deep magic. He is unapologetic and fierce in his commitment to regionalism at a time when so many of the forces in modern life are pushing so hard in the other direction. It's not a romantic or a sentimental regionalism. It's one that's built on deep engagement and confrontation with the past. It's one that can hold together at the very same time the dark, violent, tragic elements of the American West with a reverence, even an exaltation for all that the West is and still could be. He always asks, and as he says in Eagle Bird, the hard, right questions. And he always listens. This has been a theme over the last day and a half. He listens with an intensity and a respect that one rarely experiences. I've learned so much from him about how to listen better and about the generative power of long silences. Outside of his devotion to his family, his many varied and deep friendships are in some ways the greatest testament to his character and to his commitments. I told him that when David died, how envious I was of the friendship that they had. They broke the mold. That was really one for the ages. As I mentioned this morning, it has been my great good fortune this semester to teach with Charles, but also to watch him teach, and most importantly, to be taught by him in the more formal environment of the classroom. It has been a real highlight of my professional life, and we haven't even gone on the field trip yet. And I've been struck by many things, but one of the things that I've been struck by the most is how shy he is and how shy he can be or seem. And I think that's a reflection of his deep humility and his deep commitment to a truly collective form of inquiry and problem solving. His rectitude, and I mean this in the very best sense of the word, makes us all think hard about what we want to say and how we want to say it, and to speak with more care, much more care than we would have. But then he gets cranked up on a topic, and he can riff with ease for an hour or more on something that he not only knows about, but lived, and he can yell and he can cuss. As we've heard, he's legendary in his cussing, of course. He can tell stories that make us all laugh, and the stories are the best stories because he's lived these stories. So it's a beautiful thing to watch. His students are in awe of him, as are his colleagues, as all of us are, and as we should be. Charles Wilkinson knows where he is and he knows who he is. He's put his considerable gifts to work in defending people and places across the American West. He's inspired us all in so many ways. He has gone out in the world and he has made a life that matters. Thank you, Charles.
I'm Hal Bruff of the faculty. I think I was asked to speak because I was once Charles's dean and am now his colleague. I'm the only person in the room who can say that. I wish we had the much richer reflections that our dear David Getches could have provided. I'll have to do what I can. Let me start. If the rest of you will just ignore me for a minute, I have some things I want to say directly to Charles. So we're alone now. I know these 2 days have been very wearing for you because being praised continuously causes some stress. Just the suspension of one's natural sense of disbelief for 2 days must be wearing. The problem is it's all been true. And you're going to have to suspend your natural sense of disbelief for another couple of minutes while I pour more onto the pile. Okay. I was a rookie dean. When you're a new dean, you speedily learn that something is in short supply in dean's offices that you didn't think was in short supply. Wisdom. In my case, I'd brought very little in with me, so I had to look around and see from what faculty members I could glean some. And I soon learned that, considering now people in the room, the likes of Sarah Krakoff, Rick Collins, our David, and surpassingly Charles, would provide me as much as I could absorb. So happily, by the end of my deanship, there was much more wisdom in that office than there had been at the start, and a big pile of that came from you. You know, when people are around deans, in many cases their personalities change, and not always for the better. But the people I've just mentioned, and above all Charles, were the same as colleague to dean as they were later colleague to colleague. There was never, in Charles's case, any hint of special pleading in our relationship while I was running the joint. He was, as he is in so many other ways that you've been discussing for 2 days, simply Charles the whole time. And I very speedily learned that I could rely on your good faith, your judgment, and your profoundly constructive spirit for the organization in which you found yourself. That is happily shared among law faculties, but I've never known a better exemplar of that than Charles. I treasured it in you during my 7 years in that office, have treasured it every day since. And it turns out that Charles makes, if anything, an even better colleague and friend than faculty member and friend at the start, because you have a bit more time, the richness of it, to develop a fuller, deeper relationship. And all I can say is that I have treasured that beyond measure.
Each of these is a tough act to follow, but I'm Kristen Carpenter. I'm on the law faculty here. And I wanted to offer a few remarks inspired by the Eagle Bird book, which we've heard about a lot today. In one passage, Charles says that the law is or can be bloodless. And then he goes on in that book, and I think in his life's work, to put life and spirit and flight back into the law. And to make us believers in the law again. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit on how, for me as a junior faculty member, Charles has been supportive and inspiring, and I think he's been that way for next generation of American Indian academics. We often hear about how he and David inspired Indian lawyers to move to the forefront at NARF. He's been doing the same too for Indian academics, and certainly that's been my experience. So just 2 points, I guess. With all of his incredible accomplishment, Charles always, in just very kind and generous ways, and maybe you didn't even notice, but gave me a chance, right? First of all, hiring me, and you probably didn't recognize my name or my work or anything when I was on the market, and Sarah was thankfully chairing appointments. So just giving me the opportunity in the first place, and it was such an incredible dream to be hired at the University of Colorado Law School, where David Getches and Charles Wilkinson and Rick Collins and Sarah Krakoff and Jill Tompkins then were teaching American Indian law. So I was the 6th person in, 6 people teaching Indian law on a relatively small faculty. I had just had a baby, I was relatively new at all of this. And so it came time for teaching assignments the first semester, and Charles said, well, you'll teach federal Indian law. So I was the youngest, newest person, and just gave me that opportunity and sort of paved the way, and there was no question about it. Daniel was in my class, and really gave me the opportunity to, develop that voice as a teacher and turn around and be able to teach and mentor this next generation coming up, and there are all these beautiful students and future academics in front of us, and I truly appreciate that. Then it came time to direct the Indian Law program and become an associate dean, and every time I went to talk to Charles in just a casual way, and every time he said, "You can do it," and more so, "This is your time to serve." There comes a time in everybody's career when it's their time to serve. So the twin, "You can do it," and "Step up," have been really effective for me mentoring. Matthew, I think on the last panel mentioned the Federal Indian Law casebook. It's Getches, Wilkinson, Williams, Fletcher, and I've been invited to join it, about which I'm absolutely thrilled. And Charles is smiling, and I haven't done any work on it yet, but I'm gonna I'm gonna do a fabulous job, let me tell you. But again, so I'm the first woman on the book. Matthew and Rob were the first Indians on the book. I mean, he's teaching us, right, and giving us the opportunity. And when we met last spring to talk about what we were going to do with the book, Charles was the most energetic person. He said, "Yes, we're going to revise the book and do nation building. Yes, we're going to revise the book and do international human rights law." He's leading the forefront, right, of change, and he's not, like some people are in previous generations, resisting it in any way. He's excited about what we're all going to do and egging us on just as much and lighting a fire under us. Just quickly to wrap it up, the other thing that for me Charles has modeled with respect to putting life and spirit and flight back into the law is to be representing tribes while working as an academic. And I think in this community, because we're so close to NARF and our own tribes and others, we have lots of opportunities. And every time one crosses my desk, whether it's to do a brief on a religious freedom matter, and Steve Moore has been kind in giving me those opportunities, or work on an Indian Child Welfare Act case, or whatever it is, and I hesitate and I worry about my time and my family, I think about Charles and this legacy he's leaving. He has made such an incredible difference, and it's the books and it's the articles, but it's doing the actual work, getting out there and representing tribes and using this incredible privilege and set of resources we have to do that. So every time I think I have those worries and doubts, I just think about Charles, and I know he's down the hallway doing some even bigger and better and more important matters. So I'm just going to kind of try to follow in those footsteps. So I've gone on long enough, but I guess I will, always in those moments, in those ways, always really be deeply, deeply thankful. And you've been soaring, and hopefully we can all try to follow you in that path. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rick Collins, another member of the faculty. 40-odd years ago, I first worked with Charles trying a case in federal court in Albuquerque, learning that he's an excellent trial lawyer, among all the other things that have been said today. But the one point I wanted to stress in my 3 minutes is the vision thing. Now, that became a mocking term for junior Bush president, but in Charles' case, it should not be a mocking term. Charles has had the vision beyond almost anyone else about one thing after another. Think of the various events we've heard about the last 2 days, one after another, whether it's public trust or Menominee or Siletz or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's always got. We talk about the ethic of the West. And of course, one of the metaphors in the West is looking over the horizon. Charles has always had the vision to see over the horizon better than anyone else I know. And you think, well, maybe, can he top this? And yeah, bear's ears, he's topped it.
Hi, I'm Carla Fredericks. I'm also on the law faculty here. I've heard so much today that allows me to reflect on who Charles Wilkinson is at this moment and what you've meant to so many people throughout your distinguished career. I feel like I've known you my whole life. We tribal people recognize our elders by some sacred attributes. the strength of your knowledge, the spiritual commitments to your people and by your community, which you talked about last night. Charles, you're an elder. Of course, it's not age that makes you an elder. In fact, by listening today, I think he's been an elder since at least age 31. Elders hold a special place in our tribal communities. You are the carriers of our memory and our life experiences. While in youth, one has the energy, it is as an elder that one can exercise their wisdom. As an elder, you are sought out for advice and counsel. As an elder, you are often seen in the center of a group of young people, which I can attest to being in this building. As an elder, you share your knowledge. As an elder, you are respected and recognized by others. As an elder, you possess knowledge of our stories. As an elder, you possess knowledge of our values. As an elder, you possess knowledge of our history. As an elder, Charles, you have spent a lifetime acquiring significant wisdom and experience, and you're a repository of our cultural and our philosophical heritage. As an elder, you have earned the respect of your chosen community, and you are looked upon as an elder by that community. As an elder, you're a transmitter of information that you've gathered and wisdom that you've gathered to future generations. Within our cultures, elders deservedly occupy a revered position because they are gifted with great wisdom and use that gift to advise, resolve disputes, and act with them as a model within the community. Elders know that they hold our stories and they remember every detail so they can relate it at a later time. You, as an elder, are the word and picture carrier, making history and spiritual values alive and important. I should also mention that it is the privilege of an elder to be respected, to be listened to always, and to be catered to, and to be taken care of. I know we all happily will do this for you, as you have for us.
Hi, Charles. We're a little bit that maybe you and others have heard enough from me already today and last night. But I have a few more things to say, and I'll try to say them briefly. So we've heard about notes that Charles has given people. And so I thought I'd just mention three notes that I've gotten from Charles over the years. One was after he and I were in the dean's conference room for a meeting, I don't know, one of some meetings or other that faculty have to go to. And I had had a snack in the conference room, and I had peeled a banana, actually, and left the banana peel on the table. And so this note from Charles came to me later in my office with the banana peel. It was a Post-it note, and all it said was, classy. So that's one note. The other note is was actually to my husband, John Carlson, and he sent John this thank you note. John was out riding his bike. He rides a road bike like a lot of Boulder types, and he was riding his road bike out by the reservoir, and he came up behind a Prius that was pulled over, seemingly stalled out by the reservoir, and lo and behold, it was Charles Wilkinson in the Prius, stuck there. Apparently the car had conked out, had died, had some malfunction. And John called, I don't remember actually the exact details. I'll just cut to the chase. The car wasn't broken. It was a Prius. It was David Getch's Prius. Charles didn't know how to start it up again. And so John either called David because he had a cell phone, or came home when we called David, or got in the car and showed you how to start the Prius. I don't remember. But then came the thank you note from Charles. Dear John, thank you for saving my ASS out at the reservoir with the stalled Prius. The third note I'll mention is that after I had my daughter Lucy 10 weeks early in an emergent, crazy, scary situation. I was in the hospital, completely insane in all kinds of ways, and Charles faxed me a note, a handwritten note of congratulations and, you know, well, congratulations on your beautiful daughter. And that meant a lot. I'm sure any of you who've been in a health crisis or emergency, you remember every single thoughtful thing that a friend does for you. And a lot of people are too busy and so forth. So actually to get that note, I think it was the day or the day after she was born, was really something. And then maybe more meaningfully, after that, David, Charles, and Jim Corporidge, my three very senior male colleagues, took over the class I could no longer teach and taught, rotated through teaching my seminar until I could come back. And so I will always remember that. And those are those little things that your friends and colleagues do for you, in addition to all the incredibly huge things you've already heard about. The second thing I wanted to mention about Charles is his advice. We've also heard about that. He's sparing with it, which is really amazing, especially if you're a kind of stubborn person like me. I'm not very mentorable or coachable. He's sparing with it, but so then when he says something, it really sticks. And I'll just mention a couple that he said to me over the years. One, I think I asked him a question about when I was very junior. What should I do about my research agenda? Can you help me think about my research agenda? A very nerdy law professor thing to say. And he just stopped and looked at me and said, it's your writing. It's your writing. It's not a research agenda. And I think you know what he meant by that. It's like you're communicating, you're writing. It's not a research agenda, right? Really changed the way I think about it. Another one very recently, like Kristen and many of us, I try to emulate the service record that Charles has compiled. And so I was working on an amicus brief this last fall, a Supreme Court case, a very important Indian law case in the Supreme Court. And I was batting some ideas around with Charles about how to go about it. And he just said in like 2 sentences exactly the framing for the amicus brief. I mean, and this is so... And I won't bother telling you because I'll have to go into too many details, but it just was like, oh yeah, that's exactly how we have to make the argument in this brief. And it's almost annoying, really, actually. It's like, dang it, I wish I had thought of that. And then one last thing. So Charles, right after his 70th birthday, I saw you, and I said, happy birthday. And you said, and you know how he always will stop. He'll stop you, so you really have to listen. You said, it keeps getting better and better, but I hear only up to a point. And I just love that because I forget what, I was mid-40s, I guess, then, and, feeling all sorry for myself and old and so forth. And here is Charles saying it keeps getting better, better, and better, but then realistically only up to a point. Okay, so I just want to say quickly a couple things about Charles's lasting genius, at least as I see it, and not to repeat. I think these are a couple things I can just encapsulate that others haven't quite mentioned explicitly. I think, in addition to being a visionary, as Rick said, I realized over the years that what Charles has done is he has done things, just done things, in a way that people later sort of theorize about and put labels on. For example, in his teaching, we now call it experiential learning. But he and David and Jim put together what I think of as this amazing developmental curriculum at CU Law, starting with Foundations of Natural Resources Law and ending with the field trip seminar. That's an experiential learning process before anyone was talking about it that way. That's just one example. The other that we've been talking about all this whole time is ethic of place, right? And sustainability. Everybody's talking about sustainability all over the site. Sustainababble, I saw this term. I mean, Charles has been living and breathing and working sustainability and ethic of place his whole career, and that really means thinking about the people in the place, not separating out the resources from the people and so forth, right? This whole divide between environmentalism and environmental justice that many of us are trying to bridge now. Charles never had to bridge it, right, because he always saw it that way. And so I think of his lasting genius in that way. And then the last thing I just want to say is thank you, Charles, for letting us do this, because as Hal alluded to, it can't be easy to sit there. I think a lot of us would be acutely self-conscious, and I'm sure in some way you are. And yet you've given us this gift to allow us to say all these things to you, with you here, knowing we have a long future to continue to celebrate with you. Thank you.
So, I'm painfully aware that I am the last thing between Charles' family and the man himself. So I'm going to try to be brief, in line with the brevity that my colleagues have showed as well. But I do want to make 2 points to Charles. And the first one is to acknowledge the gift that you've given natural resource law scholars. And I think the gift that you've given us is this ability of announcing legal reforms before they happen. And I say that in the context of the old essay that you wrote in High Country News way back in 1991 now, the obituary to the prior appropriation doctrine. And in 1991, and indeed even today, some people still think there is a prior appropriation doctrine, notwithstanding the obituary that Charles wrote for it back then. But it was prescient in a way that I think those of us who write in the area of law really fully appreciate. And that really is a gift to us because it has given us space to write about reform that is somewhere not quite as far as you took it in that somewhat tongue-in-cheek essay that you wrote in the High Country News. And along those lines, the other sort of way that you did this is in crossing the next meridian and in calling out the lords of yesterday, which, you know, again, are not so much the lords of yesterday in some respects. We still don't have mining law reform. We still don't have the kind of grazing law reform that we might want to see. And yet you managed to sort of call those out in a way that was compelling and that has given us the ability to talk about these issues in ways that I think is so important for scholars who are writing in that field. So thank you for that. That's been a real gift to us. One other point I guess I want to make, and this is something that I think people have alluded to a lot today, but I want to, I guess, shout it out a little bit louder and a little more directly. And that's just something about why all of us are in this business, why we do what we do. And it's not, of course, just about the legal issues which we care about and we're passionate about, we talk about all the time, but it's because of our love for the resources that we're trying to protect. And what I have to say about Charles is that he reflects this love of the resources in spades. And I just want to reflect on a couple of thoughts about that. One is that I like to run early in the morning, usually, often out at the Boulder Valley Ranch. And, you know, not infrequently, I run into Charles, often with his dog out there on the prairie. And I mean, you know, it's just early in the morning, I'm kind of out of it. Usually I have my headphones on listening to NPR or some nonsense. And Charles, when you see him out there in his element, he has the biggest smile on his face as if sort of sharing this wonderful thing that we have is the most precious thing in the world. And it is. And when you see him in that sort of vein, you can't help but smile and laugh yourself at the wonder of what it is we're experiencing. And along those lines, Charles, I just want to sort of reminisce with you about one other experience that we had many years ago now. I don't even know if you remember it, but I certainly do. It was 1989, and I'm going to tell the short version because I want to save time here. But it was 1989, and Deb Donahue, I think, was the editor of the Law Review, and she had won an auction. Many of you know Deb. She teaches law now at the University of Wyoming and has for many years. But she won an auction. I think they're doing the auction actually upstairs this afternoon. But she won an auction where you offered to take some people fly fishing. We ended up going into the headwaters of the Poudre. I think William mentioned that a moment ago. And for some reason that I won't get into, I was invited to go on this trip. fly fishing. Now, if you know me, I'm not much of a fly fisherman, and sort of to prove it, I brought my one and a half year old son, Sam, and threw him on my back as we were out walking in the fields. It was a long walk that we took up through the meadows of the Cashlaputer, not along a trail, eventually working our way through a lot of brush to the stream, and a lot of fishing was done. But the joy that you sort of showed in, I mean, you were just so in your element, and it was just such a beautiful thing for me to experience. And I didn't really know you at the time. I think I had met you, I had heard you speak, but that was really the first time I had spent any significant amount of time with you. And it was a really magical thing. I could go on and on, I won't. I'll just say it was capped off by a long, long hike back to the car. I think it was dark by the time we got back, and Charles pops the lift of the truck and pulls out a cooler that's filled with ice cold beer. And it was a perfect ending to a really special day. And I just want to thank you for that. And I hadn't thought about that for a long time, and this sort of event gave me the opportunity to reminisce about that. And I just want to say to Charles and to all of you, let's not forget why we're in this business, and let's get out and show the kind of joy that Charles shows in enjoying the natural world. So thank you, Charles, for that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charles's son, Seth. I guess after listening to you all, it won't surprise any of you to hear that growing up with my dad was to grow up in a world of endless, limitless enthusiasm and optimism and excitement. And sort of if I have one image that sort of I just remember when I think about him growing up, it's of him just crashing around the house. I mean, crashing and yelling about whatever it was that excited him at that moment. I mean, it might be Tiger Woods' performance on the 7th hole at some unheard of golf tournament, or the Iditarod, or whatever it was that grabbed him at that moment. He would just be overflowing with it. And one of the topics that sort of was a subject of his optimism and enthusiasm back in the late 70s was Oregon Duck football. The Duckies, as he used to call them. And by pretty much any objective measure, in the late 1970s, the Duckies were one of the worst football teams in the country. I mean, they were bad. There were high school teams in Oregon probably who could have beaten them. But my dad every year had a very carefully thought out, articulated theory on why the Duckies were perfectly positioned to win the Rose Bowl that year. And he would take me to Ducky games, and we'd often go in the fourth quarter. And the reason we go in the fourth quarter was because you could get in for free in the fourth quarter. And the reason you could get in for free in the fourth quarter was because there was only one person in Eugene who wanted to watch the Ducks play from 56 points behind. But he'd lead me charging up the stadium and pull me down to the sideline and stand next to me, and he'd tell me about that third string quarterback or running back and how graceful he was, and look at the way he sets his feet. Or he'd tell me the backstory on that freshman kicker or whatever it was. And it was magical. It was magical. And I don't know, I was thinking about this today, I don't know that we ever saw the Ducks win a game. But every day, every time we would walk out of there triumphant. And I think it was that quality, after having listened to all of you, that made him so perfectly positioned to be an advocate for the Indians and the Indian tribes. Because there he was in 1971, before my time, but he's told me about it a lot, sitting up in a high-rise building in San Francisco in a comfortable law firm, and he looked out on Indian country. And, you know, a lot of people, most people in that position probably would have seen a pretty hopeless situation. It was termination. But my dad saw pure potential out there. He was blown away by the leaders that he saw he'd get a chance to work with, John Echo Hawk, David Getches. He absolutely loved the culture and the people. He was so pulled into it. And he saw a wrong that needed to be righted and that he thought could be righted. He saw a cause for justice. And so he made that his life. You know, in some ways I think it was that simple. And so we have Menominee, and we have Siletz, and we're going to have Bears Ears. And so I guess I just want to say that as just a citizen, just as a person who cares about justice, I am so grateful that he found that cause and was able to contribute to that, all those important wins. As a lawyer, I am so grateful to my dad for teaching me, as I know he's taught all of his students, that you can and must practice law with passion. And as he says it, practice in technicolor, not black and white. And as a son, I am incredibly grateful to all the Indian people, to the tribes, and to all of his colleagues for giving him this purpose in life, this beautiful career that has given him so much happiness and so much pleasure. It's been such a joy to see him fulfilled in that way. It's been such a joy to hear about it these past 2 days. So thank you all, and thank you, Dad.
Hi, I'm David, Charles' son, and first off, I just want to thank the law school, Sarah, Britton, everyone involved for putting on this event, and it's a huge honor for my dad and for our entire family, so thank you all. I'm going to tell a quick story that sheds a slightly different light on my dad, even though I'll admit now I realize he was a total wild ass in his professional life as well, so it's not quite as unique of a story as I had hoped for. When we were young, almost every spring break, we would pack up our gray minivan and head to the canyon country. And my dad was so excited. He was so excited the whole way down, and he had about 4 latte stops on the way out of town, out of Boulder. And I remember one time we were getting pretty close to Moab, and you could see the red rock, and the dirt had turned red. And my dad pulled the car off on the side of the highway for us all to go to the bathroom. And as always, he said, "Boys, don't piss into the wind." So my dad he gets out of the car and reaches down. I'm still in the car, and he grabs a huge handful of sagebrush and starts rubbing it all over his face and body. So I'm puzzled in the car. Dirt and sagebrush are flying everywhere. He's got his denim on denim, as we all know very well. Coffee stains on his shirt, pissing directly into the wind. Stuffing sagebrush into his shirt now that he'd bring to Moab. Yelling, "People want to go to Disneyland. This is goddamn Disneyland." So that is my father in a nutshell. And I think the lesson here is that as many people have said this weekend or this week, my dad truly loves the West, and it's one of the main reasons why he's done such a tremendous job over the years. And you know, outside of the classroom and outside of all the meetings, he just loves the West. This event is huge for my dad. And another really important event happened this year that made him very happy, and that's the Broncos winning the Super Bowl. And I wouldn't want to compare the importance of the two for fear of offending the law school, but he was pretty damn happy about the Broncos. I'll just leave it at that. And as has been covered very well over the last couple of days, a third really cool thing that could happen this year would be Bears Ears National Monument. And for our family, Cedar Mesa is a sacred place, and it's where we went as kids. Sorry, I'm probably going to choke up here. Slickhorn, Grand Gulch, Fish and Owl, Muley Point. That's where we grew up and spent our vacations, and it's sacred for my dad. So I think it's going to happen, and there's a lot of people in this room that can make it happen. So on behalf of all my family members here, I just want to thank my dad and my mom for being such great people and teaching us to treat people the right way. And I'm going to finish by saying something that you've said to us many times. We're proud of you, Dad. We are goddamn proud of you.
I am Charles's daughter-in-law. I'm married to Seth, also known as Charles's daughter. I haven't had a chance to attend any of Charles's law school lectures, but I have had a chance to get a taste of his teaching style. It wasn't about the tribes or public lands or treaties. He taught me about something much more lofty: poker. Before I met Charles, I knew nothing about poker, and nor did my son Khalil. But he took us on as students, and he invested many hours teaching both of us how to play. And most of those hours were spent on Pender Island and his beloved Salish Sea. He taught us about the various card combinations, how to hold our cards. When you're betting, you only use one hand, not two. And he taught us when to fold. And so now we're both pretty good poker players. Now, if you haven't played poker with Charles, you're really missing out. It's quite an experience. The first thing you'll notice is that he does not stop talking the entire game. He's got this running commentary going. Every time someone's dealt a card, he has some funny comment. Like if Anne is dealt a queen, he says, "Oh, a queen for a queen." Or if someone's dealt a seemingly useless card, he'll say, "No apparent help there." Or if someone looks like they're going to get a straight, he'll announce, "Oh, straightening." He'll say things like, "5-card stud, back where I come from. They call that the game that made the West." In that accent, too. The next thing you'll notice when you play poker with Charles is that he has a very unique way of bluffing. Now, he taught me and Khalil that we should never reveal our cards. We should hold them close to our chest, have a poker face, and only at the very end when you show your cards is when you reveal them. But sometimes when you play with Charles, right before the last round of betting, he'll just announce, all I've got is a pair of sevens. And we'll look at him incredulously, trying to figure out, is he bluffing or is he telling the truth? And we'll each think to ourselves, he's got to be bluffing, because you'd be crazy to announce your hand to all the rest of the players right before the last round of betting. So we'll go ahead and we'll just ignore him and lay our bets. And then at the end, when we show our hands, it turns out he wasn't bluffing. He was being dead serious. He had a pair of sevens and nothing else. And it's just unbelievable. And so the next time you play, he does the same thing right before the last round of betting. And you'll think, no, this time he's bluffing. But no, he's always dead serious. And I'm waiting for that time when you're actually bluffing. Very unique strategy. So the third thing you'll notice when you play poker with Charles won't be a surprise to you. Charles brings a sense of enthusiasm and fun and excitement to every poker game. He's totally present, totally focused, and he's just having loads of fun. And his joy and his passion are contagious, and so the rest of us have learned to love poker too. And it's those qualities in Charles that make him an exceptional and extraordinary teacher, poker player, and person. So thanks, Charles.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charles's daughter, Samantha, but I am married to his son, David, so technically I am his daughter-in-law. I feel a little self-conscious about closing out this panel because it's been so wonderful and everyone has had such nice things to say about Charles, which is no surprise. I want to start by saying how I met David, which was many years ago during our first year of law school. And I remember him telling me that his dad was a law professor. And when Dave told me that, I remember feeling so nervous to come back to Boulder and meet Dave's parents because, not to offend any of the wonderful law professors in the room, I just had images of being at their house in Boulder with the Socratic method going over the dinner table and not being really sure how I would be able to handle it. But then I got to Boulder and I met Charles, and he immediately put me at ease. And this has been a theme from today and the last couple of days. Is the first thing that struck me about Charles and sticks with me to this day is your enthusiasm. We've heard a lot about his enthusiasm for his work, but it's also for all the other things that he loves, big and small. And it's funny, we all have said that. So it could be a hike in North Boulder, that moment with Izzy, ordering a latte in Seattle, talking about fishing with my dad, making the Thanksgiving turkey or tofurkey some years, or shucking crab on the deck of Pender Island. You've heard Zara talk about Pender Island. That's a place that's very special for our family. It's one of Ann and Charles's favorite places that they try to make it to every summer. And when Charles gets there, he completely embraces the island lifestyle. So one day, and in so many different ways, but one day a group of us who'd just been doing our vacation or activities were heading back to the house, and we noticed by the water tower on the side of the road, Charles standing with a group of people, locals, and we thought, what is he doing? And we realized it was Pender Island's Water Council meeting to discuss the water shortage on the island that summer, and Charles was there to get in on the action. And I will always remember that because I thought, wow, as someone starting to work, I just, you're always doing what you love, and your enthusiasm never leaves you, whether you're on vacation or here at the law school. But one of my favorite things, I think the best thing about Charles for our family is not only his excitement about the things that he loves, but his excitement for everything that the rest of us love. He has a very special way of making everyone in the family feel special in a very ceremonial way. So some of you might know this. I think it's maybe referenced in some of his books, but he has a special name for all of us. And he doesn't give it to everyone right away. He waits to see kind of who they are and what's important to them. And then he gives it to them. So when Charles gave me my name, he had put a lot of thought into it, to all the various options, and then he finally presented me with the best choice. And we are anxiously awaiting the next name in the family, or the next family member. So I just want to close by saying thank you to everyone. And Charles, we are so lucky for your enthusiasm, for your thoughtfulness, and your love.
Thank you all. Thank you, my colleagues and Charles's family. We now have the last reading of the day by one of Charles's many former research assistants who is here, Carrie Covington Doyle. And anyone who knows Carrie knows she's a powerhouse in her own right. Makes a lasting impression on all of us who knew her here as a student. She is practicing Indian law herself now here in Boulder at an excellent small law firm. Carrie, thank you.
Thanks. I'm sort of equal parts mortified and just chuffed that I got sandwiched between all of my law professors and Charles's family, and right before Charles speaks. So we'll see how I do here. I do recognize that I'm the last thing standing between all of you and Charles's words, so I'll be brief. But I do want to share, so I'm here to talk about what it is to be an RA for Charles. Many people who spoke today have been RAs for Charles, and there's many people in the audience who are both students and RAs of Charles's. And I thought to tell two stories that sort of encapsulates it for me. And they're very short, but at the end of my 1L year, I just had the endless luck to get to work for Charles. And so I finished my 1L year, which was a rough go. I didn't know how to speak law school. So I meet with Charles at the Boulder Auto right after finals, and he gives me a box of books, and he tells me about this Solets project, and he sends me off to Oregon. I mean, just me and a box of books in Oregon for 10 days. He just trusted me to do that, and that's what he does for his RAs. It's just this, and that goes to his intellectual generosity, which Don Snow talked about. He just believes in you, and by believing in you, you do better. The second story is about what you get to do as an RA. So I worked my whole time in law school on the Solets book, and it was a true honor. And as we worked on it, the more we worked on it, Charles came to realize, and he came to me one day and said, "Carrie, I've figured it out. I figured out what I'm doing." And what it was he was telling the story. He was basically downloading the information in Bud Lane and Robert Kenta's brains. He said, we're just giving voice to their story. So once we had written once he had written and we had helped him endnote all the chapters, and they were in pretty final form, we did, I think, 2 different retreats out in Oregon, out on the coast, where Chairman Pigsley talked about the long meetings. Well, they didn't stop when we were working on the book either. They were 2 or 3 days long, and we would meet in a conference room with the entire tribal council, and we went page by page through the book, page by page. That's not something historians usually do. It's not something I ever thought that I would get to do, and I carry it with me every day of my work. So, what is it then to be an RA for Charles? Well, it's disbelief at one's utter good fortune. It's participation in the fullest sense in something very good. It's kinship. It's a charge we carry with us for the rest of our careers to do our best work and give voice to the truest stories. And, to be sure, it's white-knuckling it in the passenger seat while Charles pilots some unsound jalopy down a screaming mountain pass in the dark while telling tall tales and gesticulating wildly. So over 40 of Charles's RAs have been here these last couple days. And we're all just thrilled for this chance to get together and to honor Charles and to thank him. And so I ask everyone who is an RA or has been an RA for Charles to stand now, just so everyone can see us all. Oh. So now I'm doing the reading part, which is I'm just going to read sort of a mashup from the acknowledgement section of a few of your books when you wrote to us as your RAs. And I think I probably speak for all of us. When we're at low moments in our lives, we probably go back to that book and we read that little part and we feel much better. So this is Charles in the acknowledgement sections. My kids, my research assistants are not blood relations, but then again they are. Over the years, my research assistants have been able and creative young lawyers, colleagues in the full sense, full partners in this work. To all of you, thank you ever for all you have done for this book, from the tedium of the endnotes to your careful edits, to interviews, to the creativity of sending me off in directions I would not have explored on my own. And still from Charles, as each of them has explained to me in their own ways, their time on this book will be of special importance to them throughout their lives. My debt to them and affection and respect for them will stay with me forever. The feeling is mutual, Charles. So there's so much more that all of us had to say to you, and so if I could have Allie and Vernon come up. Vernon was Charles's first RA. He's a University of Oregon grad from 1978. And Allie is the baby RA, CU, class of 2017. And they are going to bring up a book of just our reminiscences and our thank yous to you, Charles, from all of us. So. That's it. We love you, Charles. And now it's off to you.
Well, when I first learned about what this would be like, and I've had trouble. I will go to the website and I'll start reading this program, say 3 weeks ago, and I just can't do it. I have to stop. I have to avert my gaze because just to give two examples, the quality of the people who have come here is so stunning. And the same is true with my research assistants. I look at those names and I just marvel. And so I knew that it wasn't something that I could prepare on because I didn't know what was going to happen this day and a half. The way it has come out, I mean, you can imagine I certainly wouldn't have dreamed it would be like this. This is a truly extemporaneous presentation. I want to thank Phil Weiser. I think he is not here right now, but he was here all day, all night last night in our dinner. And I've been so blessed by my deans. You've met Hal, and you can imagine what a blessing that was. And I've thought back in conjunction with this gathering and realized that with the exception of one unfortunate 2-year period where a dean did run into trouble, nothing illegal, I don't mean it that way, but ran into trouble. Other than that, I've just been blessed by this cavalcade of deans who did nothing but urge me to do what I wanted to do and what would fulfill me. And of course, David was part of that. But the important thing in a certain way is it was the other ones also. I also have an urge just to thank the staff of the University of Colorado Law School. So often people implicitly define the law school by faculty and students. But the things these staff people do, they are quality people. And I wish we more often took a moment to appreciate them and thank them. We do pretty well at it, but boy, they deserve it. I cannot believe I've been lucky enough to have my family here. It just means so much. This is sort of my thinking since noon to say this. In my world, I'm not saying that I know what is somehow the most important. But I do know one thing, and that is what is most profound, and that is the Indian way. And I'm not going to give a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to give just a few things I've observed in the belief that when you begin to build upon them, you can begin to see what's happening, what has happened and will be happening forever. There have been a few references to how far tribes were down in the 1950s and 60s. That was the all-time low point of tribalism on this continent. And it was clearly impossible that it would change. And termination was a policy that was taken because everybody, and if we'd all been around then, we would agree with the premise, which was Indian country is just a dead-end street. That's how it would look to our eyes. And we're not being insensitive or anything. That's how it would look. The poverty, unemployment rate was 65%. All-time high point in the Depression for just about 2 weeks was 25%. And they pulled themselves together. And I want to say the reason they did it was simply, the ultimate thing was that they just cared so much about their land and their people and their cultures. That was the foundation. That, and Dee and I laugh about this, or, grimace about it. That and the tribal budget, which was in a 24-ounce coffee can, about a third of the way filled up with change. And that's the way the tribes were. And today, and the BIA was the real government. And today, there is no question who the real government is. It's the tribes in Indian country. Over 60 million acres, just a little bit less than the size of Colorado. The size of a large western state. The tribes are the real governments. Now, the federal government has something to say, the state has something to say, but inside the states, the United States has something to say, and the state and the tribes have something to say. They're the real governments. Dolores, like 50 or 60 people here, and each one is special, but Dolores and I know how special it is, what we've been through. And one thing was the Silet's book, and Dee said that it was supposed to take a year, and it took longer than that. And in fact, I can tell you it took 5 years. It's a very big book that the University of Washington Press, before publishing it, the president of the press, I gave him 10 things I wanted. And he said, we will do all of those things for you and more. And they did. And they just, that book, you can't have that book be a better book. And so I came out on my first trip. And I met my blood brothers. Bud Lane, Robert Kent. I knew Bud when during Restoration. He was, 12, 14, 15, kind of running around the room and back. Probably running under the chairs and stuff, on the cement floor where the meetings were held. And I didn't know Robert. And I know so much is going on here, I can't remember who, but I think it was Carrie, said that finally we realized we were telling Bud and Robert's story, because their story would be 14 volumes long. And the one advantage I had on them was that I knew how to make a 14-volume story, a full story and a great story in a volume, and then later on we'll do the 10 volume. They are, and now I'm trying to tell you that this is happening across Indian country in different ways on the reservations. Greg, by the way, I'm sorry somebody brought up the obituary of prior appropriators. I was hoping you'd left. I know how painful it is. And the thought balloon over Greg's head is the hell it's an obituary. And so this is happening across, the cultural revival isn't just dances, not just, but it's more than dances and gathering and weaving and telling stories and ceremonies. It is more than that. It is serious intellectual work done by Indian people instead of by white people. And the two of them, and understand that I'm speaking literally, and I want to just say, and this doesn't begin to measure Robert's intelligence, but Robert has a photographic memory. I realized that about 6 months into this, and I said to his sister, you know, I think Robert has a photographic memory. And she said, no kidding, Charles. But that's not the point about Robert. That just happens to be a fact about him. So the two of them, and notice the words I'm using here, have read everything the white people have written about their people. And they grew up hearing the stories and grew up as Indian people. They are dancers in Nadash. They are weaving. They are singing. And so, all of a sudden, what we thought, or I thought when I started was, and they, you know, Dee didn't say she wanted a long book. But I realized that there were three choices. One would be a short, superficial one, after dealing with Robert and Bud for 6 months, let's say. A short, superficial book, a 14-volume book, or a 400-page book that would be a very respectable piece of scholarship and human interest. And so what they are, in terms of quality, are the kinds of senior faculty members in history departments that you would have in any university in this country. And the way they schooled me, and they would have profound things to say, and both of them, they were really good about it because they were very polite people. And I and Craig Dorsey's here, both of us, we learned, Rick learned, we all learned our tribal sovereignty. The tribes have sovereignty. Well, so that's tribes. They're a confederation. Each tribe had its own sovereignty. No, it didn't. All the sovereignty was in the villages. And so I had started out, my first draft said something about the sovereignty of the Tillamook tribe. And Bud would say to me, very kindly, probably a note written on the page, you know, because he was looking at my draft, would say, the Tillamook sovereignty actually was all in the villages. And so my second draft would be, much of the sovereignty was in the villages, and Bud would say no, and so then this happened, and I said, nearly all. But all the discussions we had, and Carrie was telling you about this. This was so thrilling, and Dee, I know you felt the way I did that first meeting on the coast. And I wanted to come out and have some of the meetings on the book out here because they'd come out and they'd enjoyed it, and it's a great place. And we have the Kiva room where we could have great meetings. But Robert said all of them have to be on Aboriginal territory of this book. And so that forced us to have the meetings on the Oregon coast, which was okay too. But it was a sunny day also. And it was just electric with discussion about the tribal societies before non-Indians arrived. And so the Siletz tribe, and you heard some other things about the Siletz tribe, but they have this this luminous cultural and historical capability. one untold story about modern Indian country is the scientific work. And every tribe now has scientists, and sometimes they're anthropologists, staff scientists, tribal scientists. And again, understand that these governments today are 300 or more employees, tribal employees, excluding gaming operations and other enterprises. And so they have administrative agencies, courts, jails. Sometimes they contract with the county. Sometimes the county contracts with the tribes. And they have cultural departments or sometimes natural resource departments that include cultural. But, and again, I'll use one last example with the Silex. Lampreys. They're not eels. We call them lamprey eels, but they're lampreys. And you know, they're biologically not eels, apparently. And they're the eels with the teeth that latch onto fish and just scour the fish to death with these incredible rows of teeth inside their suction cap mouths. And of course, so non-Indians know what to do with them. I mean, there's no doubt what to do with them. Give them a good shot of rotenone. And let's get every goddamn one of them out of that river, or out of that lake. And so the lamprey eel population is just going like that. Well, sorry, the Indian people, with the Silex tribe being one of the leaders on the Oregon coast, said, no, they are important for the ecosystem for all kinds of reasons, and we have to bring back the lampreys. And it's hard to bring back the lampreys, but they are doing it. The scientific capability of the Northwest tribes on the Columbia River and Washington is stunning. There's a Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, a consortium in the Puget Sound area of 23 tribes. And on the Columbia, it's the Columbia River Intertribal Fisheries Commission with a consortium of 4 tribes. The Nez Perce tribe, which is one of the tribes on the Columbia, has 70 fishery scientists and technicians. Twice out of the state of Idaho. The Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, and it's big-time salmon recovery out there. And one reason there is a salmon recovery is because of the tribes. I promise you that. And they have about 50 fishery scientists and technicians at the Fisheries Commission. Every tribe then has its own Fisheries Commission on its, and the commission itself, the employees there work on policy, they work on different matters, and including having a first-class lab for fish genetics and fish health. And they've got the 50 fishery scientists, and then each on the river that each tribe is on, you're going to have another staff of 5 to 20 fisheries. Altogether, the tribes in Washington have more fishery scientists than the state does, and just a few less than the federal government does. Billy Frank Jr. At his memorial service, I found myself comparing him to Martin Luther King, to Gandhi, and others. Billy Frank Jr. belongs in that company. And as one who was at his funeral, the day he died and the 2 days afterwards, 3 days in a row, front page headlines on the Seattle Times. At his funeral, the crowd estimates were between 8,000 and 10,000. And the governor, both U.S. senators, 3 congressmen, all attended and gave talks. And President Obama sent an American flag out with a personal note because he knew Billy. And since then, Billy's received the Distinguished Medal of Honor posthumously from President Obama. And the Congress has passed a statute that has been signed by the President changing the name of the Nisqually Wildlife Refuge to the Billy Frank Jr. National Wildlife Refuge. Now, Northwesterners know what Billy Frank meant out there. But the long and short of it is that he fought out on the rivers until the Volt decision came down. And then he said, now I've got to be a policy guy. I used to be a getting arrested guy. And he became a ambassador extraordinaire. And agreement after agreement, understanding after understanding came about. And you heard an example of Slade Gorton holding a hearing trying to abrogate the Indian treaties in the Northwest. And all the citizens came in, the citizen groups came in, no, we're getting along here. This co-management is working. And Billy was a big part of that. The Navajo Nation. It's far and away the largest Indian tribe in terms of people, 300,000. In terms of size, 16 million acres, bigger than 10 states. And it's absolutely one of the most interesting governments I know of. They drafted their own constitution. They have their own legislature. They have a federal system with the national headquarters in Window Rock, and then some 90 chapters around this very large area. And the politics in the central office will drive you crazy. They have some good days, maybe 80 a year. It's not that bad. And it's not as bad as our Congress. It isn't. But it tells you what happens when a government gets large. And they had 6,000 employees. But they're making it. And one thing I'm reminded of every moment now, of every waking day, and my dreaming days, these things, is how traditional these tribes are we're working with in Bears Ears are. And the Zuni, the Hopi, the Ute Mountain Ute tribe is fascinating. It's a Colorado tribe with some land in Utah. Tawak is the southwesternmost town in Colorado. Sleeping Ute Mountain is on the reservation. And it's been my pleasure to get to know them better. And the conversations during this Bears Ears thing. Oh, any of you would love to sit in on these meetings. They go all day long. They start at 8:30, go to 6:30 with working lunch. 40 to 50 people talking through the issues in this bill in the most serious way, with some Indian humor sprinkled in, and then serious statements coming across, just being made almost offhandedly. I walk out there, I can hear the voices of the ancestors down in the canyon and up in the mesa. Question just goes on. Because they do hear the voices of the ancestors, and the footsteps of the ancestors are still there. One thing about Indian people is that they will say, we're losing our culture. And I'll go out on the reservation for 3 days. And my actual reaction will be, losing their culture. And what they mean, why the reason they say that is that it is so important to them to keep the culture, so important, that the slightest crack, and it hurts so much. And I'm not saying a slight crack is insignificant. I don't mean it that way. I just mean that, and some things are getting lost or are going underground for a while. But other things are being rediscovered. And some of the old songs come back and old dances come back. And I mean, I've only been at it for 45 years. And I say that not trying to be cute. I've only been at it 45 years. I do have to say that over that time, recognizing all the difficulties with the culture and how painful it is, I'd have to say that the culture is as strong as it was when I came into it. And the young people, you saw here several young people, 35 or so and under. And you could see them. Natasha, who spoke a while ago, what she didn't say, kind of the way Ada Deer talked about Menominee and Patricia Zell talked about at the time in the senator's office. What she didn't mention is her role in the Bears Ears effort. And you talk about sophistication in terms of building a movement. She is unbelievable. And she knows how to meet with traditional medicine men in the morning and talk to me and another lawyer, say, at lunch, talk to political leaders in the afternoon, and then put in a call to Washington, D.C. later on. And each one she has scored right. She has seen what needs to be done at each of those steps. And to me and to her, the most important one is with the traditional people. And she has that. And of course, Indians can spot the traditional people right away. And they know Natasha as somebody who's a modern person and been through universities and so forth, but still has that talk. Tribal leaders during negotiations, sometimes you will just hear them say, We aren't going anywhere. And I just believe that so deeply. I don't, and they don't say it as a challenge, really. They say it as a fact that they want clarified in the negotiations. We aren't going anywhere. And so, to me, the profound thing, the thing that is outside of my family, that has touched me the deepest in my life, has been the Indian way, has been Indian tribal sovereignty. Things that just 50 years ago, the culture everybody knew was gone, and the remnants were just going to be there to be swept up in a few years. And tribal sovereignty, what the hell is that? And today they both are alive and well and vigorous and fascinating and worthy of study from the outside and immersing ourselves inside and fighting for their rights in a way that is deserving as anything that comes across our lives could be. I thank you so much, all of you, for coming, for the people who have participated as speakers, for those of you who, many of you who have stayed and listened to these lies, exaggerations, but it's on the record. I send my love to you all.
That's okay, that's just my research assistant.